Well, it feels like this war in Iran is really just one battle after another, doesn't it, my fellow sinners? See what I did there?
That was pretty good.
Well, pour a drink because we are bringing you into our group chat about politics and the next generation of leaders in our country. This is Political Playlist Happy Hour.
Welcome to Political Playlist.
All right, are we ready, guys?
Happy Hour.
Happy Hour.
We fucked that up so bad.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Political Playlist Happy Hour. I'm Anna Muskie-Goldwyn.
And I'm Anthony Barquette.
You like my little cold open in Michael's absence?
I knew you were going to do something Oscar related, but actually you did better than I expected.
I mean, I did better than I expected too, because I wrote that like 1 minute before we started recording and it just came to me, you know?
Speaking of, did you enjoy the Oscars?
I will say that I did enjoy the Oscars. I think that I was reading something today that really encapsulated how I felt about it, which is like, I feel like in recent years, there's I guess like Barbie and Oppenheimer, but everyone kind of knew Oppenheimer was going to sort of sweep on that stuff. Like, it hasn't really felt like there's been like a couple top films where you really felt like deserved to get all the awards that they were getting and whatever. And I was a fan of both of those movies, and of One Battle and of Sinners. And I just thought that it felt like it was kind of more joyous, the Oscars this year. Like, there was a lot of first-time winners. There was a lot of, the first female cinematographer won, which is so cool.
And she gave a great speech.
She gave a great speech. Like, I thought Michael B. Jordan winning was amazing. Like, Jessie Buckley is so sweet. There was this great picture of them hugging backstage, and you could just, it's just like, it felt like none of it felt tired, and none of it felt kind of like jaded Hollywood. You know what I mean?
So I agree on that. I definitely felt like there was a bit more positivity in it. I actually really enjoyed how they did the In Memoriam as well.
I agree.
Like, at first it was kind of boring, and then I'm like, oh, they brought in people to really highlight some of the big ones. But I will say, sometimes for the presenters, the jokes are so bad.
That was the one downside. I didn't think the writing was as good this year as it's been, which surprised me because I feel like Conan always brings together great writers. One thing I really didn't like about some of the presenters was that the bits they were doing were completely unrelated to the subject matter of the category. So it kind of felt like, okay, you're doing a joke about yourselves, but like, and as a creative person, I was like, if I was in that category, I'd kind of want you to be talking about the category. You know what I mean?
I honestly, it was like the one with Chris Evans and
and Robert Downey Jr.
And Robert Downey Jr. was so awkward.
It was very awkward and weird. The most awkward to me was the one with Bill Pullman and Lewis Pullman, his son.
Yeah,
it was like,
that was also.
Because I also was like, neither of those people are comedic actors. And so giving them this like bit to do felt really odd.
Yeah.
I agree with you. That was the one downside, was the presenting like bits were not so good. But overall, I thought it was quite enjoyable.
A lot of political speeches, though.
I was just about to say that. It was very political. And
no
wars. It was very political, but in a way that felt not so like awkward. Like, I think sometimes when the Oscars or award shows get really political, like, you kind of look at the audience and everyone's like, yeah, like obligated to clap. And this felt like there was just enough that what people were clapping for was like real. I will say, if you haven't seen that documentary that won, Mr. Nobody Against Putin, go watch it. Ooh. It is so good and so freaking insane, and like all about just the militarization of the Russian population, and like watching what happens to children in an autocracy like that when war breaks out and there's all this propaganda. Like, it's just crazy how they were able to put together that film. So highly recommend.
I have not seen it, so I will.
Nice. But speaking of adversaries, should we dive into how to talk about something today?
I would love to.
So today we are getting into, yet again, how to talk about Iran, but this time specifically how to talk about the Strait of Hormuz. Is that how you say it? Hormuz?
Yeah.
Ugh, bad white person. But just what's happening now, there's obviously retaliation to the U.S. and Israel striking Iran. Iran began prohibiting passage through the Strait of Hormuz, which caused tanker traffic to drop by 70% at first, and now it's essentially to zero in the last couple days. And this stoppage affects about 20% of the world's daily oil supply. And while very little oil comes to the US from the Strait of Hormuz, since oil is traded on a global market, the price of oil is dependent on what's happening in this area. And if you have been to the gas pump recently, like I have, then you definitely are aware of that. I wanted to kick off this bit by referencing one of our favorite Democrats on the platform, veteran of the Middle East himself, Jake Auchincloss from Massachusetts, because he had a very important statement on the news that I thought, where he said the new Khamenei, the new Ayatollah of Iran, who no one has still seen in person, now has new leverage, closing the Strait of Hormuz to deny all non-China navigation. This is a first-order strategic failure by the president. He must come to Congress with a plan to end his war of choice and ensure freedom of transit in the strait. So basically, Iran is now using the Strait of Hormuz as political and military leverage, and it's kind of working. Because Trump is getting squeezed a little bit, and now he's like asking European countries for help, and they're sort of like, maybe we're not sure. This isn't our war. So it's just getting kind of messy over there in the oil trade part of this war.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up some of our young politicians first, because many of them are talking about this, and I would say the young politicians aren't talking about the Strait of Hormuz specifically, right? They're using this opportunity to, talk about Iran policy, in general, oil prices, Middle East wars, global shipping security.
Mm-hmm.
And we're really hearing from, like people like Mike Gallagher, Elisa Slotkin.
Mike Gallagher's not in Congress.
Sorry,
anymore.
Mike Lawler. Elisa Slotkin.
We miss you, Mike Gallagher, by the way.
Yeah, he was great. Ro Khanna and Johnny Olszewski.
We think.
Yes, we think.
One day we're going to interview him. We're going to be like, look, Johnny.
He goes by Johnny.
You got to give us your name.
No, but I mean, Anna, maybe, do you want to give Trump credit because now everyone has heard of the Strait of Hormuz and might know what it means?
I don't know if that's the credit that I'm worried about right now, but sure.
I just wanted to get you on record saying that.
Yeah.
But I know you gave a little bit of background, but it does connect the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman, and then that opens up to the Arabian Sea. So there's, you said 1/5, 20% of the world's oil supply goes through here. That's 17 to 20 million barrels of oil per day. Isn't that wild to think about? So obviously a lot of the main Gulf countries around there, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, UAE. It's also the main route for liquefied natural gas, LNG exports from Qatar. About 20 to 30% of the global LNG trade moves through this passage. And, Anna, you did a video a couple of weeks ago on the LNG growth that's happened in the United States over the last few years. And that there's definitely some of those U.S. businessmen making a lot of money. But another interesting thing here. So right where the strait is, where, Oman that's right where Oman and Iran are split. So that's 21 miles wide. So now that might seem huge, but in reality, it's only 2 shipping lanes, one going in and one going out. So you can kind of see why this has really created a bottleneck. Now, there's already been about 14 vessels that have been either attacked or had shells hit them already. So ship owners and insurance groups are really worried about sending ships, due to this. Also, as well, supposedly there's a large amount of mines that Iran has also put in this strait. So, despite Iran's navy being decimated, are the words that we're hearing, they're able to deploy a lot of these, where some are anchored to the seabed, some are floating mines, and then some are they're able to put on ships by just having like divers basically go down there and attach them, which is really scary.
By the way, that's crazy.
It's crazy to think about. So who's helping the U.S. right now in all of this? just today we had Germany and Italy pull out. Trump's called on China, France, Japan, South Korea, United Kingdom to send warships over there. These are probably the countries that are benefiting most from the strait. The UK is considering it. It seems that the US is obviously getting help from the other Gulf states right now as well, just from a security standpoint from themselves. But it's funny, and I'm sure you've heard Trump say that we might have the US Navy escort ships through the Strait of Hormuz, right? So this happened in history before. So in the 1980s, Iran and Iraq were involved in a war, and various attacks on ships happened. So they had the U.S. come, and the U.S. came over and escorted oil tankers through the Persian Gulf. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Guess how many ships were attacked during that time?
Oh God, like half of them or something.
400 ships.
Okay.
So pretty crazy to think about. Where you're like, okay, so even if we are there, there's probably still going to be ships that are attacked.
Totally. I mean, I think that's what's so crazy about it. So just a side note here, when I was growing up, we had this family friend where the father was actually a barge captain. He was a shipping, tanker captain. I don't think he did oil, but I forget what he did. But one of the big things that he would talk about is there's of course this inherent risk in doing that. You're going through a lot of international waters. Where he was going, there was a lot of pirating that was happening. Wow. We've all seen the movie Captain Phillips. We understand the concept of these ships getting attacked. But what seems so specific and crazy about what's happening now is that this isn't just kind of your everyday risk for these captains and these workers on these boats. It's a heightened thing that they are now the product of an unwilling product of war. Not that any soldier ever wants to die, but when you sign up to be in the military, you're signing up with the understanding that, okay, one day I might be sent to war and something might happen to me. I don't think that when you're signing up, especially if you're signing up for financial reasons to help your family because you can make a lot of money working on these boats, you're not signing up to be I'm going to go put my life at risk for these barrels of oil, right? And so there was something where a boat from Thailand got attacked in Iran already in the Strait, and all those workers had to be evacuated. I think that luckily none of them died, but that's just the beginning of what could happen, right? When you talk about these mines. And so I think that there also has to be a sort of human understanding for these people that this isn't people who are coming and signing up for this. This is now Trump saying, well, have some guts and go on this mission of yours. And they're like, wait, but our mission was never to be put in a body of water where there's a bunch of mines. Our mission was to bring oil around the world, right? And so it just feels very putting people in harm's way that never signed up to be in harm's way.
Especially when Iran is shooting off missiles in kind of a kamikaze-like way. Right. And so you kind of alluded to this, Anna, where it's sort of just the beginning. We've been talking a lot about oil, right? There's going to be a shortage of oil. We're already seeing oil prices or gas prices skyrocket in the U.S. I don't know if you saw in downtown LA, it's at about $8.50.
I saw that. I mean, I will say I went to the cheapest one I could find around me, and it was still over $5 a gallon.
Yeah. Well, so beyond oil, we have a bunch of other gas products I'll mention, but it's now going to affect farming in California. One of the other big items that was not on my bingo card was prescription drugs.
Interesting.
So beyond oil, there's refined fuels coming through here, diesel, jet fuel, you have gasoline, and various petrochemicals for feedstock. So this whole area is a massive exporter for plastics, fertilizers, synthetic fabrics, chemicals used in manufacturing. That's where Saudi and the UAE really dominate. You have aluminum from Bahrain and UAE used for aircrafts, cars, construction, electronics. And then on the fertilizer side, you have food costs that are going to rise. Agricultural commodities are increasing. So this was a crazy stat to me. For California, 95% of the fertilizer used to grow crops in the Central Valley are coming through the Strait of Hormuz.
Wow. Well, that's so interesting when you say that, because I feel like one of the big things that Trump keeps trying to say, even though it doesn't totally make sense, is he's like, none of the oil that we get is actually coming from there. So we're not going to be at shortage of oil. But I think it's leaving out these other things like all the fertilizer that, okay, yes, the average American is not going to immediately feel the price of fertilizer going up or the lack of fertilizer like we will our gas. But like, oh, eventually we're going to feel that when the price of groceries goes up because there's not enough food supply for things. So it is really, I think that there's a lot of repercussions of what's happening right now. And my fear about it all is just not even from a political stance of this, but like, I don't fully understand how we can get out of this mess now, because Iran, like I said, is weaponizing the Strait of Hormuz kind of effectively, despite having, as you said, like a very decimated Navy, military leadership, all of that stuff. But they have this one thing that they can keep holding over the rest of the world. And when you were talking about those other countries, yeah, like you said, Germany has now basically said no. France is like, yeah, I think we'll maybe help, but it's unclear. And one of the big players in this, like we had talked about on a last episode, is China. And 45% of China's oil comes through the Strait of Hormuz. So that's like twice the global average, right? And now China is actually pressing Iran to allow ships through, because Iran has been sort of so on letting Chinese ships through, despite the fact that Iran has actually been letting some other countries ships through, like India, Turkey, and Pakistan. So China's now going to have to like bend the knee to Iran to try to get some of these Chinese tankers through. And who knows what the political ramifications of that are for the US and our allies. So I just like, Trump aside, I just am in this like position now where I'm like, I don't really understand how we get out of this, because I don't think that striking more military targets in Iran is, the regime seems to be not giving up. So what do? You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Trump administration is going to have to end this pretty quickly. You know, you just brought up India. One of the crazier, the thing I said that was not on my bingo card was I was reading about how modern medicines really depend on petrochemicals. And nearly half of the US generic prescriptions originate in India, which relies on the Strait of Hormuz for the arrival of like key inputs of these petroleum-based materials. You know, and
wild.
Right? So I just started reading into it. And I was like, all these oil-derived products are used for chemical solvents, plastic pill packaging, synthetic drug ingredients, pharmaceutical manufacturing equipment. You know, so you can see how all of this, it really does affect the world.
Well, and I think to go back to what Jake Auchincloss was saying, you know, one of the big things that he brought up, which a lot of Democrats are bringing up, and I think an increasing number of Americans feel, regardless of party, is that this is so very clearly a war. And so if it's a war, we do need to have Congress involved, because Congress is the people who represent us, the voters, the people, the citizens. And what he said, I'll repeat, is Trump must come to Congress with a plan to end the war. And I think that is what everyone is craving at this point, is like, what is the plan? Obviously, you can't give the full strategic plan away if you have one. But I think that what I feel is missing so much from the Trump administration right now is just a sense of like, these are our goals. This is where we're at with our goals. I do personally very much feel that they need to be going to Congress to get any more funding, troop mobilization, anything like that should be coming through Congress at this point, although I have very little confidence that it will. And I think that it's like very concerning that we don't have a plan when, as you've stated very clearly, what's happening specifically in the Strait of Hormuz is affecting all of us on a very individual level here in this country.
Yeah, and where Trump has always been effective, but I think it's now kind of falling out for him, is he plays the waiting game. He can take more stress than probably anyone, and he's done that effectively in his lawsuits. He's waited them out, and he tires out the opponent. Unfortunately, I think he's starting to see a bit of his base and his politicians starting to abandon early and not be fully in on everything he's doing lately. And I think that's keeping him from maybe executing him, that grand plan. But,
I think also to that point, it's not just that his base is maybe breaking or whatever. I think just like the realities of foreign policy are coming in, closing him in. You know what I mean? Like, it's one thing when he's trying to impart tariffs on other countries and going through the court system or going through these lawsuits with like different, people he's trying to sue or organizations he's trying to sue. But it's very different when the realities of a foreign adversary that you don't have any control over start coming at you, which I think that he has probably been very frustrated that the regime in Iran is not giving up in the way that he and Pete Hegseth had hoped. And I wanted to, before we wrap up, I wanted to bring in one other young politician who I thought had a good point here, because the other thing is that if this war continues, which it seems it's going to beyond the 4 to 6 weeks that they originally said, then it seems like there is an almost inevitability that there's going to have to be some sort of escalation. I mean, you say you think Trump has to end this soon, but personally, I don't think that that's like in his character to do that. And so the person I wanted to bring up was Maggie Goodlander from New Hampshire, who we actually don't talk about a lot. But I'll read a quote from her from an interview where she said, "We know from history what it looks like when you've got a president at the helm who's hell-bent on escalating, who can't answer how this is going to be good for the American people. We've seen this movie before. Thousands of lives lost and trillions of taxpayer dollars spent. The people I represent can't afford this." And just for some perspective, Representative Goodlander was a foreign policy advisor to Senators Joe Lieberman and John McCain, so certainly not a hyper-partisan figure, at least in her career. She was then an intelligence officer in the Navy Reserve. She then became a senior White House advisor under President Biden. And very notably, she's actually married to Jake Sullivan, who was President Biden's national security advisor. So
I did not know that.
Things,
wow.
all of those things combined, just to say that like she knows a thing or two about foreign policy and national security. And I like the way that she put it of like, if we have a president who sees escalation or continuation as the only option, which in my opinion is what Trump feels is sort of the only option right now, as long as Iran keeps resisting and trying to use the strait as leverage, then the only option for that person is spend more money, send more troops, and in Trump's case, don't involve Congress in doing any of it. And that for me as a person in this country who cares about prices, but also cares about human dignity and the loss of life, doesn't seem like a great recipe.
Yeah, that great quote by her, actually. We should talk a bit more about her because she is pretty interesting. And can I leave you with a fun fact though, Anna?
Of course.
So I went on a little deep dive of what other strait, passages there are for global shipping today. But do you remember almost 5 years ago now when the ship was stuck in the Suez Canal?
Oh my God, yeah.
And it was like part of COVID where everyone's like,
what was it? It was like it had a name. I forget
Ever
the name
Given.
Of the ship. Ever Given.
Such a weird name. But I just remember watching that on TV during COVID and being like, great, now everyone's gonna die because there's no food. It's just, it was one of those like, what else will you put in front of us?
I would say now seems a little more intense than that one ship being stuck.
Yeah, but fun times.
Well, stay tuned. On Thursday this week, we're going to have a really great interview with a young Democrat named Chris Gallant running in Long Island. And he's part of this group of young Democrats across the country he's trying to win the primary to challenge a Republican incumbent in a purple district. But there are also a lot of other Democrats going out there trying to challenge older Democrats who are in office right now. So he's going to come talk with us. And he actually himself is a veteran of war in the Middle East post 9/11. So interesting conversation coming up, and we will see you then.
Cheers.
Cheers.